told we're doing a typical Fifth Fleet deployment, and that was the plan until we entered the Red Sea.
This is my first destroyer deployment, so I really didn't know what to expect, and I don't think anybody expected this one.
No, nothing like this ever crossed my mind.
Attacks in the Red Sea and the USS Carney.
USS Carney intercepted and shot down 3 drones.
American warship shot down 2 more drones.
It was a fight or flight type of moment, so I believe everyone's in the fight mode.
It still makes your heart pound. It's like, okay, this is really happening.
Holy shit. There was a lot of adrenaline. There was things flying there and we were shooting things down.
Every single experience we did to train up to deployment, that's what we fell back on.
It was intense, but thankfully we got rounds out and we saved some lives.
This morning, the USS Carney will embark on a 6-month deployment, and the destroyer is going to leave from Naval Station Mayport and will visit the U.S. naval fleets in the Middle East, Mediterranean, giving maritime security.
We definitely knew the deployment was coming. It had been planned. We plan out deployments years in advance, so we knew the deployment was coming. We just didn't know what kind of deployment we were getting into.
Well, I've only heard stories, but I expected to pull into ports and party a little bit, and that was not quite the case.
You hit ports, you do set up the coast, maybe do BMD or something like that, and then you go home. So no, nothing like this ever crossed my mind.
I was a college student a year ago. When I first picked the ship, I knew that I was going to have a deployment pretty much right off the bat, so I knew I was going to finish school, and I knew I was going to go right on deployment.
I didn't know what to expect. This is my first destroyer deployment, so I really didn't know what to expect, so I kind of had an open mind, and I don't think anybody expected this one.
All engines back full, aye.
So once we got on deployment and they briefed us on where we're going, that's when we had an idea of where we're going to be operating for the remaining of our deployment.
It was pretty early on. And things started happening on other sides of the world. The XO kind of just told us flat out what the situation is and what we could potentially be facing. And at that point, the crew just started to get ready.
In the middle of the Suez, I had heard rumors that, something might happen when we get through the Suez, but it was one of those things I kind of just chalked up to, it's probably just deployment rumors.
In life you never really expect certain things or those bizarre encounters you read in the newspapers, on the news, to actually happen to you. And then when it does happen, it's like very surreal.
Very shortly after we left the Suez, I was in berthing, and we'd hear clear the weather decks, and we're all kind of looking at each other like, what does that mean? I've never heard that before.
Well, obviously, first we heard the missiles, and then once I heard 5-inch shooting, I ran into combat, started getting stuff done.
Tensions in the nearby Red Sea. A U.S. warship shot down 14 drones fired by suspected Houthi rebels in Yemen.
We're going to head to the Red Sea. Houthi rebels have been attacking ships there, of course.
This map shows you where the attacks on ships have been over recent months, since mid-November. You can see most of them are in the Red Sea.
These attacks are a clear example of terrorism, violation of international law, and a major threat to innocent lives and to global commerce. These attacks have to stop. They need to stop. They're unacceptable. The United States, our allies and our partners, will do what we have to do to counter these threats and to protect these ships. And with that, we can take some questions.
I think maybe the first night was probably the most intense, just because we had never done anything like this before. We've only trained to it, and now this is real world. There's a lot of adrenaline going on, and it was just really cool to see it actually paying off.
Yeah, so the adrenaline was really kicking in. I was shaking, but I was trained very well. I would say I was mentally prepared.
It's everybody pulling in. So the combat feeding information up to the bridge, and we all know what we need to do to keep the ship safe, and we're all just piecing it together and exactly what we need to do to keep us safe.
The entire crew definitely fell back on their training, starting from the very beginning. Everything that you're doing, all the button pushing, every single experience we did to train up to deployment, that's what we fell back on.
The training was good for setting us up for the basics, when it came down to actually looking for drones, looking for cruise missiles, being shot at by ASBMs, the basics were where A school and C school really got it right.
I'll admit I was pretty nervous, and and then kind of muscle memory took over from just practicing pushing the buttons and doing what I needed to do, and then everything was just second nature.
Not saying we got used to it. It was all new. We weren't expecting it to happen, but once we started reacting, and it kind of became our battle rhythm of this is how we're going to operate out here on deployment in a combat scenario, we kind of got used to the day-to-day and how that looked. So any engagement that happened, the commanding officer would come down to combat, and the executive officer would go on the bridge. You have a bridge team, and they're driving away from the attack or the missile, but putting the ship in a position where we can still respond, but keep the ship safe. All of our warfare areas are manned in combat 24/7, and during any of the engagements, a secondary would come back just for support in case they needed anything.
We all talk, communicate, which is the biggest piece of all this is communication and helping each other out.
Sailors from the Mayport ship, the USS Carney, are awarded for their actions in the Red Sea. They were deployed in the Middle East and shot down dozens of missiles and attack drones that were fired by Iran-backed rebels last month. Now, the entire crew also received the Combat Action Ribbon. Now, that's a big deal because this honor is rarely bestowed on Navy crews. In fact, it hasn't been since 1991 in the Gulf War.
You can't run a ship with just weapon systems or combat systems. You need everybody. It's as simple as that. Every single person on this boat is important.
Everybody has a role to play. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on the ship. Whether it's the laundry, whether you're making food, hey, those guys put in an hour too. It's just not weapons department. It's not combat systems department. Yeah, those guys deserve just to be as recognized as anybody else.
So I think if you would have asked me before the deployment, like how prepared would you be if this were to happen? I think a lot of people would say absolutely not. But as we mentioned earlier, falling back on your training, we proved that the basic phase and the advanced phase of training has actually prepared us very well.
As nervous as you get, it's not about you. It's about keeping everybody else safe. Thinking about everybody else and not just yourself is definitely something crucial.
What I learned about the people around me was hey, they're resilient. I don't know how many people would have really been able to push through that. We all try to remain effective. And that was pretty much the name of the game. Just continue to execute.
So the division, all the guys, not just mine, but the ship in general, performed remarkable. Their motivation is keep coming, keep doing what they need to do, and stay locked in. This whole deployment was I've never seen before. So I'm so proud of them, everything they do. They need us just as much as we need them.
When you're out there, you're on a ship by yourselves, and if the ship takes a hit or you're out there and you're getting shot at, it's you guys. You guys are all you have. So if you can't do your own maintenance or you don't know how to do your own maintenance, you need to learn, and you need to take the time and effort and learn it, because it will make all the difference in the world.
Everything we learned from that and all of our experiences, lessons learned we pulled, we're going to be able to make the trainings in the fleet even better. And I think a lot more people in the Navy specifically are going to be taking those trainings a little more seriously. And the more information we can give back in terms of lessons learned, I think can actually build that training phase even more.
It's really neat to know, we made history on here. Even though we're a small ship, how big of an impact we really have on the world.
That is probably one of the most rewarding experiences that I'll ever have in my entire life, is the opportunity to save other people. That is wonderful. Because it wasn't just about traveling the world, it was about saving people's lives and getting a job done.
The Navy is prepared for whatever gets thrown at us. The Navy's going to be there. We're still there. And I'm sure the Navy will continue to be there as long as there's a threat in the region.
I'm not naive. This was one of the first combat deployments and engagements since World War II, and I feel very blessed to have been on a ship that actually got to experience that. And just grateful for the team. I think the team showed up, everybody worked really well together, and I think the crew got way closer over this deployment than maybe a typical one.